It's Friday again. Welcome to Moohead Radio. I'm your host, a big and furry bovine. As Johnny Cash would say, I'm the cow in black. Joining me on the panel, Brian and Peter Powell. And you could be on the show too. All you have to go is go over to the YouTube feed, look at the show description, click on the link, and you're in. I don't even screen people except totally unfamiliar people who are only there to disrupt, and I weed them out because I use bovine logic, which I'm going to try to apply to today's program as well. I know the first thing I'm going to be talking about, Brian knows nothing about, which is really interesting. But, and I want to point out that, again, I wasn't rooting for the Bengals. I wasn't rooting for the Rams. I wasn't rooting against Odell Beckham. I really wasn't doing any of that. The team that won. I don't think either of them was really what I would call futuristic championship, forever dynasty, ooh, wow, kind of teams. But it made for an entertaining game and a close one. The happy story for Rams fans and for fans of Matthew Stafford is that after all the years of drudgery in Detroit, it finally paid off and he proved he could win the big one. All right. Didn't take him long to fuck up, though, did it? If you're not aware, at the celebration party that was being put together, there were camera people who were on the stage, and one camera person was running their camera and just kind of recording just to make sure they were in focus. It was one of the angle cameras. And so the camera was right on Matthew Stafford and his wife and a female who had two cameras on her shoulders, who was a media person who was also there to do video recording for the event. And she falls off the stage. I mean, she takes a horrendous fall. The first thing that you see, because the camera, it's not hers that is recording this, it's the guy. You see Matthew Stafford go, oh my God, and turn his back and walk away and just guzzle a bottle of water. Meanwhile, Stafford's wife, Kelly, is like, oh my God, what happened? And she's running to the edge of the stage. Fucking Matthew Stafford couldn't have cared less. He watched her take a fall. The woman ended up fracturing her spine. That's your team leader. That's your guy.
Those cameras are not light.
I'll tell you something, and I mean this 100%. That's a piece of shit, not a human being. And it's in the moment that we see, these guys have everything that they need at their disposal if they want to keep their nose clean. You should stay off social media. You've got marketing people. You've got all kinds of things that can make you look like you're the greatest guy in the world. But Matthew Stafford, in his crunch moment, didn't give a flying fuck that a woman fell, and I don't even know how far the fall was, but directly on her back and shattered her spine. And this video went viral all over the internet. And people just responded like, oh my God, that guy has some kind of sociopathic problems, because he was like, oh my God. And he turns around and he just walks away. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I didn't push her, And he walks to the back of the stage. So I'm like, all right.
Now, usually
whatever.
These stages are like 6 or 7 feet off the ground.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen performers fall off stages, and it ain't no funny thing. So at any rate...
now you got the wife and Stafford. They said they're going to pay for all the medical problems and stuff like that.
2 days later.
2
days later, after everything comes out and it goes viral, the marketing people take over. And it's like, you know what these people are going to do? And I don't mind. Kelly Stafford had a normal human reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to pay all of her hospital bills. They're going to, what great philanthropic people they are. Fuck you. I hope that Matthew Stafford is happy with his ring, is happy with his Super Bowl. He is a cocksucker and a lousy human being. I saw every excuse from Rams fans saying, oh, he was still drunk from the celebration. Excellent. All the excuses as to why he would not have had a human reaction to that. And the bottom line is he's a piece of shit. I would rather go 8-9 like the Browns did and have the miserable show here, listen, and having to read and research Browns fans than have that guy as my quarterback. With that said, I then continued reading on the media, and this is one of the most incredible things that I have read.
Mary Kay?
Oh, yes. Browns go big or go home to upgrade their passing game. Mary Kay Cabbagehead's mock draft 1.
Oh, God.
Now, are you ready for this? All right. Round 1, pick 13, Malik Willis, Liberty. I mean, you know, I'm just sitting here reading this and going, you just want to perpetually lose so you can perpetually have these outrageous opinions. Then you'll run and hide and scurry away. I don't know. I don't know anybody named Malik. Do I look like I know anyone named Malik? Hell no. So I got to thinking, what draft time has become for fans in the NFL is the veritable dartboard. It is wind up and throw, and it lands on a name. And you then start fighting for that name and try to be as persuasive as you can. And I'm saying no. There has to be a plan. Before there's a player, there has to be a plan. What is the plan? And the way you devise a plan is not looking at the whole NFL. You got to be better than the AFC North. You got to get into the playoffs. So the whole big picture is the Ravens, the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Browns. And so I started doing what I would do if I were in a front office position and start analyzing each of those teams. The biggest mystery of the bunch would be the Ravens, because they're in a situation where they haven't signed their quarterback for, his re-up, just like the Browns. He ended up the season mildly injured that turned into the last 5 games that he didn't play. He took more of a bruising and a beating than he has in his other years combined. And I take a look at the system that they have in place and the coach, who's the coach, and I say, I don't think we're even 100% sure yet that Lamar Jackson is a really good throwing quarterback, he has a great tight end. He's got a really, really good deep threat. I don't know. Does anybody know what Bateman did this year? That was their big addition to their wide receiving room. Does anybody off the top know what kind of a year Rashard Bateman had?
Let me pull up their stats quick.
I'd be curious about that.
I know he got hurt, obviously, in the offseason, which kind of stunted how good he actually could have been. So,
at any rate, I look at how are these teams positioned, and I'd say, go ahead.
Bateman was in 12 games. He had 46 catches for 515 yards and
All
one
right,
touchdown.
so he was Donovan Peoples-Jones. All right. No, I mean,
Third in receptions.
Yeah.
On the team. So,
right, and we know that Andrews was the favorite receiver, and that Marquise Brown was the deep threat,
and he had 91.
Right. So I look at this and I say, we're not sure about the Ravens. They're a question mark in my mind. The Bengals, on the other hand, are the team that's holding all the cards. They're the team with the brightest future, without a question. And if I were the Browns, I'd be looking at them as future opponent. And if I were in the strategy room of the Bengals, I know what I do in the draft. Now, the Ravens, I'm not so sure. But the Bengals, I'm sure. The Bengals already have their quarterback, and they know that. Everybody knows that. They also have a miserable offensive line. Everybody knows that.
I have a feeling that the Ravens and the Bengals will both go offensive line.
But here's where I disagree with you. I don't think that utilizing your draft for offensive linemen is the answer for the Bengals. And the reason is, I don't know how much longer Joe Burrow can play taking the beating that he's taken the last 2 years. He's already sprained a knee. They have confirmed it was a knee sprain in the last game in the Super Bowl. And of course, it was an ACL before that. So I'm looking at this and saying, gosh, you know what I do? I would go to free agency and I would find veteran offensive linemen who are good, solid, like the Browns have some of their guys, Conklin kind of guys who are getting a little bit old and teams don't want to pay them the rest of their contract. And free agency time, I would get two offensive linemen, especially the right tackle position. That guy, Price, was a fucking disaster in the Super Bowl. My reasoning is thusly. You can always draft offensive tackles lower in the draft if that's what you're doing. If you try to get higher in the draft and get offensive linemen there, the problem is they may not be ready. The world isn't full of guys like Jedrick Wills, who actually came right out and was an instant starter on the line. You have a lot of guys who have to learn technique and get up to speed with the way the game's played in the professional level. The Bengals don't have time to have a revolving door. They can't afford these sacks. This guy's knees will be broken. And he, Burrow, is the key to their future. I would go into my free agency with nothing on my mind but offensive linemen. And that's all. Then I go to the draft. And the first thing that I look at in the draft, a running back. And the reason is because Mixon, who stayed healthy for this year, is not a spring chicken, and he's the kind of guy who, if he goes down for long periods of time. With a newly veteran offensive line through free agency, you do two things. You get better running lanes for your up-and-coming running back as well as for Mixon, as long as he stays healthy, but you have a solid backup for him. And at the same time, the offensive lineman will be good for about 2 years on your team, and during that time, you can develop younger offensive linemen. The Bengals already have Jamar Chase, they already have T. Higgins. Those guys have proven that they're 1 and 2, and they have Uzomah.
Boyd.
And Boyd is not a bad 3, and Uzama is a solid tight end. So
and they
I
have
don't
Drew
see
Sample backing him up.
you don't have to improve in those areas. I know you're going to say, but what about defense, Mr. Moohead? And I'm going to tell you that if you put up the points in the AFC North, you will win. Because the Ravens are not going to outscore you no matter what they do in the draft. The Cleveland Browns, who we're going to talk about in just a minute, are a team that has had all kinds of problems in the red zone, whether it's because of the quarterback or the scheme. And now we go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have really basically raised their terrible towel saying, Uncle! Because if they go into a season, it's make or break. It's break for the Steelers. They're broke. They're without their main quarterback and never will be. He'll end up, getting laid in a brothel and becoming, public headlines just as bad as Matthew Stafford. The bottom line is Mason Rudolph is in no way, shape, or form going to lead them to any kind of a record. And I don't know,
And when he gets hurt, it's going to be Dwayne Haskins. So
yeah, that's right. Who's, you're going to have to throw short. And let's put it this way. The Steelers are not going to score a lot of points because their head coach is going to focus on the defense to keep them in games. And they're not, with those two quarterbacks, going to score a lot of points. So what does Cincinnati have to be fearful of? If you improve the protection for Burrow and you use those good receivers and you get a really high running back, and we know you don't have to get Saquon Barkley. You don't have to go that high. You can find a really solid running back at the end of the first round or in the beginning of the second round, right? Could be done.
Yeah, and a lot of like the Browns and the Packers, a lot more teams, they're also doing a lot of like 2 running back systems, so it could really work out for the Bengals.
Now, if you're the Steelers, you got to lose next year because you got to find a quarterback because you don't have one. So that's what the Steelers are going to be all about. Because the more games that Tomlin wins, the worse off they're going to be. The more that they settle, if they manage to settle into the middle to the end of the first round, they're not going to get the guy they need to get. And this year is not the year to get a quarterback. The quarterback pickings aren't mighty slim. Then there's the Cleveland Browns. And if I'm sitting in the Cleveland Browns front office, I'm saying, it's make or break next year. Absolutely make or break. And I've thought this over. I've read. I've digested. It is make or break. The Cleveland Browns have to, with their draft, have to acquire wide receivers. But which wide receiver is really going to be a hard one to answer with the scheme that the head coach wants to run. But everything else in Cleveland, the running backs, the offensive line, which, you're going to have to get a little stronger with backups there. There's no question about that. But we put all of our assets last year into our young defense, which got better as the year progressed and was never totally healthy. All there is for the Browns to do is to assess Baker Mayfield. That's all that next year is. And this is not going to be a matter of blame or not blame. It will be a matter of what's the point of assessing Baker Mayfield with a room full of lousy receivers, which is really what we have right now. Lousy receivers who can't get separation. They can't beat press coverage, and they just are not going to get open. Not for Malik, not for anybody. All right? So if we're going to assess this guy that we're not 100% sure of, one way or the other, we have to do it with quality wide receivers. Now, one, you might be able to pick up through free agency, and 2, pick up, because I don't think Donovan Peoples-Jones is all that much. He's going to be on the roster, but you have to have a couple of different kinds of receivers. Every team in the league came out against the Browns in press coverage by the middle of the season and just shut them down because it became apparent that none of the receivers could get off the line of scrimmage and could get separation from that coverage. So any ball that was thrown, no matter which quarterback it was, the man was covered. So let's start at the beginning. Hooper is the wrong guy.
Yeah.
All right. What we're seeing in the NFL with the successful tight ends are the guys who can get enough separation from coverage so that the ball can be fitted in down the middle of the field. We're not seeing tight ends running fly patterns. It wasn't like Ozzie Newsome who could actually get downfield and beat people.
Well, and here's the other thing. Hooper has to split time with the other 2 or 3 tight ends that are on the roster. The Andrews and Kelsey and Kittle and even Freiermuth, they take 90 to 95% of the snaps for their teams. So their targets are going to be way higher.
I went back to 1984, which I think was a pivotal year for the Cleveland Browns. My good friend Sam Bertigliano's last half a year as Cleveland Browns coach, in which they put in an offense that was designed to have one power back in the backfield instead of a 2-back set. That was Mike Pruitt. And I started reading about this and I became kind of enthralled because it was a 2 tight end alignment. I started thinking about today's Browns. Back then, they drafted number 1, Harry Holt. He's a tight end. Ozzie Newsome was a tight end when he was a wide receiver in a tight end's body. And he could beat you downfield, over the middle, the sideline, you name it. He had great hands. He could get to everything. And the idea was that you'd have big guys up front to block because we know that Newsome was a very willing blocker. And Holt had speed as well and could get downfield. And the understanding was that 1984, it was Brian Sipe who was kind of already 32 years old and had been through the wars, and Paul McDonald, his understudy. In 1983, Sipe did fine, but by 1984, he was gone. And 83 was the year in which Sipe threw too many interceptions, and it led to Retigliano wanting to remodel and refigure the offensive scheme. So the way things turned out was that Marty Schottenheimer...
They had also drafted Charles White.
Who was injured.
So
he ended up with a knee injury.
They wanted to feature him. So
right. So in the end, what you wind up with is Paul McDonald as your quarterback. You start out the season with Retigliano and Sipe with Retigliano at 1-7, and you finish out Marty with. They ended up going 5-11, and it was like, what did they see in Paul McDonald? And the answer was nothing. We as fans remember things differently, but once I start reading about it, it's like, well, this makes all the sense of the world. You're 1-7, you play like shit. They shit on Retigliano because Modell 2 weeks earlier said he was going to sit through this. And then 2 weeks later, he fired him and humiliated him publicly.
Yeah.
So Marty becomes the head coach and he gets Paul McDonald as a parting gift. They end up finishing last, and that's that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, gosh, that was the smartest thing that they could have ended up doing, finishing last and having a lousy team, because that's what led to the supplemental draft trick to get Bernie Kosar. So that was the deal. That was the reason. All right. We were in the position in 1984 that the Steelers are in now. Brian Sipe went off to the USFL, and you got Paul McDonald. And you just lose, baby. Just lose. And then you get a quarterback.
Outside of Pat Hayden, I can't, and going all the way back to Gifford, I can't think of another USC quarterback that's really done anything for a sustained amount of time.
Now, Ernie Accorsi came up with the great idea, hey, supplemental draft. We ended up with Bertie Kosar. So 1985 became the cautious year of Gary Danielson, who was brought into the room and to be the tutor and the running two-pronged running attack of Biner and Mack. So that's where Pittsburgh is. Where we are right now is that we have to assess the quarterback. The only way we can assess the quarterback is with good receivers and receivers that work within the head coach's scheme. All right. For us not, to go out and get Malik or do whatever Mary Kay Cabbage Horse said, whatever the case may be, you have to get the wide receivers and get the people into position who are going to become the foundation of the offense of this team, even if it's not with Baker Mayfield. If you're completely satisfied with the way Mayfield plays next year after surgery with a better group of wide receivers, then you can stay with him and re-sign him. But if not, you give the next guy who's going to be, if you suck, that he's going to be the quarterback that you get from the draft. And at least he'll have wide receivers and a running attack that he can work with. If you do it the wrong way and you just say, well, I just give up on Baker because I'm an asshole fan, it doesn't help anything. I think we should get a quarterback. You're a fucking moron. The big plan at this point is the only way you're going to compete in the AFC North is to score fucking points. And you're not going to do that. And I'm afraid with this particular offensive scheme, we may never do that. But whatever it is, the receivers we have now are not good enough. So when we talk about all of these receivers, whether it's Treylon Burks, whether it's Drake London, whether it's Garrett Wilson, whether it's Chris Olave, there is one certainty that we know. They will be facing a press man-to-man coverage. And if you bring in people who are incapable of doing a job against press coverage and couldn't in college, don't bring them on board. They're the wrong guys. So you wipe people off the board. Then you have to say, do we want a slot receiver, and what kind of slot receiver do we want? Do we want the guy who comes across the middle sure-handed and just make sure that he gets you the possession? Or do you want a big guy who's going to fight for the ball and get that possession and not necessarily break through? You want a little guy cutting over the middle who's Eric Metcalf after he catches the ball and cuts and winds and is yards after catch guy. And also from the slot, can he beat people long? There are receivers who just don't play well from the outside. The other thing is this coach will not, and this front office will not bring in wide receivers who can't block. Now, we've already seen it. We've seen who made the team and who didn't make the team predicated on whether they could block or not. So we know that this is part of the equation for this front office as well.
Although I have to say that Hodge is a much better blocker downfield than Higgins.
Absolutely.
And he still got cut.
It was only the chemistry that allegedly existed between Mayfield and Higgins stopped trying. After the whole OBJ thing, he just said, fuck it, I'm not even going to try anymore. So my feeling is this isn't hard to figure out. The Browns put all of their resources in the defense. This time around, they have to put all of their resources into wide receivers and making them the right people for the scheme that the team wants to run.
And
The
beefing up
Bengals
the backup tackles too.
and the
Starting the backup
Bengals,
tackles.
yeah, you got to have backup offensive line because our guys go down like flies. And of course, then there's the Bengals that we know need leadership offensive linemen. This is not going out and getting Anthony Munoz like the good old days. There ain't one. All right. And if there were, they couldn't get to it. Consequently, they have to, from their free agency, do that trick. So this isn't hard to figure out for me. And in the process of this, I will say what I have discovered. Treylon Burks is the one that keeps coming up in the Cleveland media. All right. His ideal role, according to every fucking review that I could find on this guy's college career, says the same thing. He's a possession receiver that uses his size and his body to shield defenders. And he has the ability to catch 50-50 balls. The scheme fit for him is a system that can get the ball in his hands quickly so he can use his frame to break tackles and fight for extra yardage. Now, what I'll tell you is this. This is not a guy who's going to just bust it down the field for you. It sounds like what Hooper should be. Seriously. A guy who
or
consistently...
David Njoku.
But no. Allegedly, this guy consistently catches 50-50 balls, and he has this big frame to shield defenders, and he is a guy who will fit into a scheme that you get the ball to quickly. I mean, that is what Stefanski does. That would be an exact description of what his offense is. Take steps, drop, 3 steps back, fire the ball short, take your yardage, and the deep threat is really the changeup. You suck them in, you put them to sleep, you hypnotize them, and then you go for the long ball, which we don't have anybody who can run. But to be very honest with you, in 1984, the Browns didn't either, and they got a guy named Bruce Davis who was fast as hell, and it didn't help him that he could run a straight line down the field because he couldn't catch. Be that as it may, and Paul McDonald couldn't.
Started off with Ron Brown from the goddamn Olympic team.
I mean, the Browns tried so many wide receivers in 1984. It was really weird. They got a guy from the Dolphins, I forget his name, and he was supposed to be a downfield threat. But they have this left-handed quarterback who came from USC, who is used to playing the USC 1980s offense, which was the West Coast offense. But it was not a West Coast scheme, and consequently, he was not effective at throwing deep to these wide receivers. So, here's the issue with Burks. His ability to separate could be an issue in the NFL. Yeah. And this is what I'm reading as far as multiple people saying. In the slot, he can get into his routes and find spacing. But when lined up on the outside, there are inconsistencies in his ability to get separation during his routes, which is why the 50-50 catch and the fight for the ball is so important to this guy's professional career.
And a guy like Burks, if you look like a lot of his film and stuff, a lot of his where he would line up was in the slot. So he's basically untested on winning on the outside. And what I saw is he's only had 39 reps against press in college throughout his entire season. Only 39. So he's not proven there yet. And we need a guy who's a separator and can beat press.
By the way, the most common name that comes up in comparison was Alshon Jeffrey. He was drafted in 2012 by the Bears, right? So that we know what we're dealing with. The same guy from other sources, other comments that were negatives
And
was,
Jeffrey actually started off with the Eagles, I think.
yeah, you may be right. No, he was drafted by the Bears.
Oh.
He was drafted by the Bears, but he may have found his way to the Eagles, yes. Because I seem to remember him in the green uniforms that get booed at all the time. His effort wanes when blocking when he isn't a primary read in the scheme. That ain't going to work. That ain't going to work with Stefanski. And he needs to continue to refine his route running techniques. All right? That's the story with him. Drake London, the other name that comes up right along
No thanks.
with Treylon Burks. He's strong-handed. He is more nuanced when running routes. He does not have elite separation quickness at the top of his route. He's more of a high cut player, but he can get separation on intermediate routes.
And
he's a better
the personality. He's cut from the same mold as Juju Smith-Schuster. So, do you want that in your locker room?
No, of course not. I'm just pointing out the names that everybody's mentioning because right off the bat, this is all about elimination. This is first having a plan and then eliminating people based on what your team does. And you can't force somebody into a scheme where you're not going to have a little speedster and then be yelling at him on the sideline that he's not blocking well enough. And you have no calls played or no plays called, excuse me. I was dyslexic. For the bomb, except once in a blue moon and everyone's feet will fall asleep waiting for that to happen. He is a good separator considering his size. His release off the line is better this last year than it was in years before. He has shown the ability to beat press with upper body strength. So again, it's more of a big guy kind of thing, and he runs well with the ball after the catch. All right.
But you know who else does that? Mike Williams from the fucking Chargers can do the exact same thing.
Well, and again, all I'm doing is talking about the draft. I'm not even talking about free agency at this point. And
Drake London, he's a guy, he's 6'5", 210, a little thin, and he's just a guy that looks like all just arms and legs, and I don't know how his weight's going to translate to the NFL.
Well, he's going to have to gain muscle because it's true of all of them that come into the league.
Even David Boston gained like 15 or 18 pounds.
And it might change the player he is, too, once he gains that weight.
Drake London's biggest negatives, lateral quickness, not so great, and blocking technique, disappointing. I'm just pointing this stuff out. Garrett Wilson, because I know. And I've been around long enough to know that anybody who comes from Ohio State is 5 times better with this fan base than they really are. Archie Griffin! Gotta go with Archie Griffin! Am I going before your time?
Poor Archie had to play for fucking DeForest Gregg. I mean,
DeForest Kelly? Blasted Jim. He's not a running back.
It might as well have been DeForest Kelly. Jesus Christ. Although he did get Ken Anderson to the Super Bowl, so there you go.
The problem with Garrett Wilson, and I know people are cringing, he is, in an ideal role, a slot receiver, but in a high volume passing offense. And this is a problem because the Browns want to be a 50-50 team. And a slot receiver in a high volume passing offense Those are the crossing pattern guys who get their separation by running diagonally down the field and just finding seams because they can outrun everybody. And those are the guys who we think of like the Tyreek Hills and those kinds of guys. That's who they are and what they do. All right. The scheme tendencies that would like Garrett Wilson would be a vertical offense, shallow crossers, option routes, and play action kill shots. You don't use your 13 pick for a play action kill shot when it comes up once a game. I mean, there is no kill shot to Kevin Stefanski, except maybe to my fucking head when I have to watch him. So here's the things that are good with Garrett Wilson. He's really good at coming back to the line of scrimmage and converting what they call a vertical push on comeback routes. And our guys don't do that very well, if at all.
Not anymore.
No. He has a lot of burst at the top of his rounded breaks. And he looked great against the soft coverage, which you'll see a lot in college. But in the record shows he took the blows and did it his way in press coverage. We'll get to that in just a minute. He drops passes, and those are concentration issues. I will say this, in the limited preseason, Jamar Chase dropped everything that was thrown at him, remember?
Yeah.
I mean, concentration is, it can get into your head. It isn't that his hands are bad. It's that he has brain farts is what it amounts to on the field. As far as separation, he's literally, once he gets his hands on the ball in the open field, he's the way he was been described as anything from chaotic to frantic. And he's a great open field runner after he catches the ball. On the perimeter, though, when he's lined up, when facing press coverage, his ability to stack quickly is hit or miss, and is going to contribute to stretches in the game where he just disappears. In the release package, which showcases high-level short area quickness, which allows him to quickly push free and release cleanly, oh, he's bad news, man. He's good. He's really good. He's at the top of the draft. But we don't do that in Cleveland. The way we're set up right now, it's going to be very hard to find a wide receiver that will do whatever it is Stefanski wants. And what it amounts to is Garrett Wilson would be another guy.
Smith and Jigba.
Yeah. I mean, it looks to me like Garrett Wilson's a guy who's also a slot guy who you're looking for him to get that step, get his hands on the ball in the slant. He's a Tyreek Hill kind of guy.
Well, he played more outside when they got Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, well, outside he's less effective. That's at the college level, and that's statistics. So, I think that a lot of people are not really that confident in him lining up from the perimeter and the outside. That is not where he will make an initial, name for himself.
And I like Garrett Wilson a lot because he has a lot of wide receiver one skill sets, such as like yak, and he's really good at the catch point with ball skills. But yeah, I'm afraid that once he comes to the NFL, and we've seen it in college, physicality is going to be a very big thing for him. And I would like him more than Burks in London, but I don't know if he's still the slam dunk yet.
Right. Hi, Bronk.
Mo.
Sorry to keep you waiting, but I've had my eyes glued on pages because I'm trying to jog my memory about what I've been reading about these players. It's an interesting thing, but the good news about wide receivers is that they can make a fast splash. In other words, it doesn't take Jamar Chase very long to make a big splash. You look at all the rookie receivers who have really become the future really great receivers. I remember when Megatron came in the league. It doesn't take these guys long. If they get to second, third year and it's just not happening for them, you can label them a bust. You can get instant good traction with wide receivers in the draft if you pick the right guys who do what you want them to do and what they'll need to do within your scheme. If it were me, I mean, I don't know what the idea is with Harrison Bryant. I mean, Njoku is the fastest and the most athletic and allegedly the best blocking tight end you've got. Play him.
Yeah.
You know, it's getting to the point where the offensive scheme, if you want to analyze the quarterback, you can make the quarterback really lousy in a lousy scheme. That I can guarantee you. And if you really want, and that's what all next year's about, it's about evaluation. Because I'm telling you today, the Browns have no chance. None. They're not going to be able. If Cincinnati does what I'm telling them to do, there's no way. The only way that the Browns could get anything done next year is if Baker Mayfield was suddenly healed and had targets down the field where instead of throwing short, that he's back to sprinting out outside, the pocket and is throwing the ball on the move to guys who are slant running down the field and getting separation. That's the only way it's going to happen. So I look at this whole thing is going to be a setup for Baker Mayfield to fail. There's a 90% chance in my mind that he will fail, and it will make all the Cleveland Browns fans really feel good because you're a bunch of twats, okay?
And Mary
It's
Kay.
about winning. It's not about your guy or my guy. It's about winning. The only way you're going to win is you got to have the right pieces of the puzzle, and that means an offensive scheme as well. And it's possible we have a scheme that everyone's going to look like Kirk Cousins in. That's the problem with it. It just marginalizes people and it turns them into our backup quarterback. It dumbs them down. You're not going to be able to get 80-yard drives consistently in this NFL. And you're worried about winning games in the end? I'll tell you, Cincinnati's got its quarterback and it's got its wide receivers in place. If they do what I'm saying and they get veteran offensive linemen in, death to Smoochie, man. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad for the Browns. And if you lose Baker Mayfield because you decide to move on, you better be prepared next year to make a big quick yank and play whatever bum you can put on the field and lose as many games as you can and do exactly what they did before they got Bernie Kosar. You better figure out a trick real quick. The Cincinnati Bengals made the mistake years ago to stay with Andy Dalton year after year after year and Marvin Lewis year after year. And it wasn't that they were a bad football team. They were 9-7 and would manage to squeak into the playoffs and lose their first game every single time. Andy Dalton proved that he was no better anywhere else he went. And the bottom line is, the whole thing, Marvin Lewis was a defensive coach. The scheme just wasn't there. The quarterback wasn't there. they were good enough to get to a certain point, but not beyond. If that's who Baker Mayfield is, if he's howdy doody without the ginger, if that's what he is, we got to find that out. But we can't do it with Donovan Peoples-Jones. And, the other thing, and I don't mean to pick on him, but the other thing that was just really annoying about Mary Kay Cabbagehead is, the notion that they're all right with the wide receivers, and if for their deep guy, that Schwartz is fine.
Did she really say that?
A number of their reporters said that.
That's unbelievable.
I mean,
That's
and she's also saying, and then trade up with Philadelphia and get Jameson Williams as well. And it's like, and then forfeit the rest of your draft and whatever players you have on your, she just wants to get rid of the quarterback. Okay. That's all she wants to do.
That's because Baker makes fun of her. Obviously treats her. Baker makes fun of the entire Cleveland media. Let's get rid of Cleveland.com completely and live our lives without it. That's what the problem is. I think there's actually a personal dislike between most of the media and Baker Mayfield that's gone personal. So,
especially with Tony Grossi.
Oh, Grossi's an idiot.
He's been an idiot for years.
He's a
anybody who listens to Grossi's picks should always pick the opposite. They'd end up making money. He has been a confirmed idiot for so long that it's amazing. Anyway, carry on with the show.
Yeah, and although Mary Kay Cabbagehead does seem to understand that Mayfield had no receiver with more than 3 touchdown catches. Only Donovan Peoples-Jones had that many. Jarvis Landry had 2, and Beckham went without a touchdown.
Or any receiver with more than 800 receiving yards.
Correct. What's this? I don't know whether you already talked about this, but what's this thing about Calvin Ridley? I heard somewhere that there was a rumor about him, or is that true?
Well, they want to try to trade for him, but he stepped away last year to focus on mental wellness, and that worries me.
Well, everyone on this panel should step away from mental wellness,
Whenever I hear that, though, I'm just, that's all I heard about with Josh Gordon. What is the problem and all of that? But to suggest that we could put Schwartz on the field, I'd rather put my Schwantz on the field.
Wow.
There's just no,
He's afraid to go over the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
the main thing I don't like is that when Mary Kay put stuff out, we have outside sources then being like, oh, we have a Cleveland reporter saying that they might be in the quarterback market, but she doesn't have a clue. She just repeats what everyone else says. And
it's amazing anyone takes her seriously. It's absolutely amazing.
Hi, Tony. Yeah. So, all of the things that, you can name names and you can come up with the biggest names in college football. But, and what's going to hurt the most is if you pass on Garrett Wilson because he can't break any kind of press coverage.
Correct. He can't.
And that's what everyone plays against the Browns. And our scheme is not devised for some reason to be able to defeat that coverage. You need somebody who's stronger and more slant oriented, more slot oriented, whatever. That doesn't mean that player can't be great for somebody else. It takes longer to learn that the coach is playing a scheme that can't win. Look how long it took for Marty Schottenheimer. You looked at Marty Schottenheimer and you said, well, he had to right the ship after the whole Paul McDonald thing. He got Bernie Kosar. But it went downhill so quick after Infante left. The offensive output of the team was nowhere near the same efficiency-wise, sharing the ball, not as crisp. And then, of course, he lost his job because he lost every close game he was ever in. And we ended up with Bill Belichick and diminishing skills. So the issue, and I see, again, I don't know whether Baker is good enough or not. What I do know is he was your number one pick and the number one pick overall. You got to get him receivers who are of the caliber of the teams that are in your division. You have to. He threw to one of the guys who's on the Ravens roster right now as their downfield threat. The fact of the matter is he had nobody like
Their
that.
tight end.
Yeah. He's had nobody like that. So you got to do that if you really want to assess him. And if he's not good, we will find out. We will not win games. He will throw interceptions. He'll eat the ball. He'll look confused, and we'll just move on. And then we'll go through a year of ultimate losing, and then we'll have to find a quarterback.
The next
And
guy
be
to
prepared to groom that quarterback. Because unlike the wide receiver, just like Jamar Chase, he can come in. He can be Jesus Christ in his first year. But quarterbacks, it's a different story. It took a douchebag like Aaron Rodgers, 5 years of carrying a clipboard before he really was able to go out there and do his thing. It took Steve Young to get the hell out of Tampa Bay to get into a West Coast offensive scheme that fit the fact that he was a sprint out, left-handed quarterback who liked to get rid of the ball quickly and was exceedingly accurate. But as a pocket passer throwing downfield,
Well, it took Joe Montana almost getting his elbow fucking broken in half to get Steve Young on the field.
and I want to.
Did you see the Athletic article that proposed the Browns trade Baker Mayfield at number 13 for Matt Ryan?
But again, yeah. You know what I think? What I would do is I would put pistols to my head, and make sure that I pulled the trigger and killed myself on draft day.
I even saw one that was saying, "Do Baker for Ryan Tannehill."
Oh my God.
It never stops. I wanted to do one thing before I get out of here, and I know that I'm going to take flack for this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then I got to get out of here. More U.S. adults identify as LGBTQ now than at any time in the past decade, a new poll shows. All right? And this is fueled by Gen Z adults. And you're saying, Mr. Moohead, where are you pulling this from? And it's like, I have nothing against the gay community. I worked in my business, gay employees. And what people do in their personal life does not matter to me. I found it interesting that the percentage of adults who told the Gallup poll they identify as LGBTQ has gone from 3.5% of Americans to 7.1% in 2021. About 21% of adults born between 1997 and 2003 identify as LGBTQ. Meanwhile, 10.5% of millennials between 81 and 86 births identify as LGBTQ. Among those LGBTQ adults on the rise in the United States, nearly 57% say they're bisexual. Not gay. 20% say they're gay. 13.9% is lesbian. 10% is transgender. But 57% say they can swing either way. I say those people are just having fun. But the reason I bring it up is because of this. Transgender swimmer Leah Thomas wins 500-yard freestyle at Ivy League Women's Championships. 4 minutes, 37.32 seconds, beating her next closest competitor by 7.5 seconds. Do you know to swim 500 yards and have a 7.5 second, it's crazy. But then you realize she was a he, a fifth-year senior who previously competed for the Penn men's swimming team. He began transitioning about 2.5 years ago. And she has dominated in the pool, and it's really throwing everybody into a tizzy. And I don't have but one opinion, and that is stop it. If you have an advantage, find your way in life. As a transgendered person, you have my blessing, not that you need it. But I believe that a transgender person should have all the social and economic advantages that anybody would have. The ability to rise and work and to get into higher pay scales, to get into management, I got no problem with that. But if you're involved in something that is so obviously tilted in your favor, fuck you. I don't need that shit. I don't need, I'm trying to think of the greatest swimmers in history.
Mark Spitz.
Yeah, Mark Spitz. Let's put him into the Special Olympics pool edition. I mean, where is the sport in dominating a bunch of people? And and the reason I feel this way is not because I'm prejudiced, even though I'll be accused of that by a group of people. I have known women on the professional tennis tour. Gotten to know several of them over the years. Wonderful people. And I always asked them the same question.
Are you a lesbian?
No. And I asked the question of a number of people. And I'm not going to bring up their names because I don't want them being bothered. But I said, could you beat a man in a men's tournament? Some said, who? I said, we're talking top 10 players. Yeah. No. There wasn't a single one who believed that they would have a chance. That includes Serena Williams. Okay? And she said that to the press. So I'm not giving up any secrets here. What would be the point of a man going out and just clubbing, women competition? It's like Andy Kaufman and his wrestling shtick. I don't get it. And I never will. So, I think it's all about fair competition. And one thing I will say about the NFL, there ain't a lot good I have to say about the NFL, is that if you're smart, you draft and you bring in the right free agents and you fit what your team's trying to do and you create a vision and fill in with the right players, you'll be successful. There's no reason to be as bad as the Cleveland Browns have been since they came back into the league. There's no excuse for that. That lies with the owners of the team, the front office says of the team, the head coaches of the team. That's who's responsible. And
Art.
Yeah, well, Art, fucking dead bastard. But, in the end, we have an opportunity here to make a decision. I want to make the right decision on Baker Mayfield, so I'll be done with it. I want to make sure that he's not the guy. I want to make sure that we have good players on the field. And fuck it, it's not because, I'm stuck on Baker Mayfield like Band-Aid stuck on me. It isn't that. It's that I want to make sure whoever the next guy is has good players on the field with them. Duh. Thanks for listening, everybody. Yeah, enjoy the All-Star Weekend festivities. I know you will, Tony. Who's your token representative?
Towns.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Carl Anthony.
Cat.
He'd be much better if he were actually challenged. Yeah. So we have a little break from Cavaliers basketball.
I think he's been challenged enough. Tony hasn't, like, 98% of his family died or some.
Yeah, his
stupid
mom
thing like
died.
that.
His like cousin.
Yeah.
He's lost like 7 people
No.
with COVID.
So I guess for me, what it comes down to is it's time for us to talk about draft while we have this All-Star break. And then I'll be back talking about the Cavaliers as well and mixing these thoughts together. But, you know, Tony and Peter and Bronk and Brian, I want you, all of you guys, to put together the overview strategy of your own, just like I did today. What, based on what we have to do in the AFC North moving forward, what I want reasons for players. I don't want Ohio State or if they went to Alabama. I don't want that shit. I want what the plan of attack will be. What positions do we need to upgrade right now? And what players fit the mold for the system that we know that Stefanski is going to put out on the field?
Right.
And that will make up the bulk of what we talk about when we talk about draft. And so when you come back to the panel next time, espouse your views. And I want to hear it, because when people listen to us evaluate the draft, we're evaluating the draft for the Cleveland Browns only, not for anybody else. So you have to keep the Viking stuff to yourself, Tony.
I don't give a fuck about
You must be feeling great that Kirk Cousins is in solid now.
Don't get me started on the Vikings. I'm trying to take a big break from the Vikings, and that's all I get around here. It's like, fuck, leave me.
I know. It's yeah. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this edition of Moohead Radio. More to come on Monday. We'll talk about All-Star Weekend and more about the draft. Tony, have you heard from Derek? Anybody hear from Derek?
I haven't spoken to Derek. I've been at work all week. But
All right, I'll see if I can get a hold of him and get his butt on the air so that he can do all of this homework too. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and I'll see you again on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend, and hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.
Bye,
Oh,
kids.